Hello everyone and welcome to our event today, all about fueling the body with plant-based nutrition. My name is Jamie and I am a physiologist and also part of the coaching team at Vitality. So the theme for today's discussion is a relatively, I would say, contentious one. There's multiple studies suggesting that following a vegan or a vegetarian diet may protect us against common chronic conditions as we get older in life. So things such as heart disease, diabetes, and even certain types of cancers. And there's obviously a growing awareness of the environmental concerns around the impact of the meat and dairy industry. And the combination of these two things, I think, has certainly prompted more people to adopt a plant-based diet. However, I would say that there's also a common misconception that transitioning to a plant-based diet will naturally make you healthier. For a plant-based diet to be complete, I think it's still really essential to pay attention to the foundation principles of healthy nutrition. So during this event, we'll be defining what a plant-based diet actually is, understanding the potential benefits and challenges to be aware of, as well as the importance of the key things such as protein, micronutrients, and we'll also touch on supplementation as well. So for this one, I'm super fortunate to be joined by two amazing guests to lead us through all of the confusion, both on a clinical, but also from an athletic perspective. So firstly, we have expert nutritionist Holly Dunn. Holly specializes in female nutrition and is on a mission to help women rediscover what they need to thrive and to restore a positive, balanced relationship with food. And we also have Maggie Alphonsi joining us, who's a former professional rugby player and director of the Vitality Performance Champions program, as well as now a vegetarian athlete as well. So Maggie and Holly, hopefully you're both still there. We just had some fun with the cameras before we joined. You're here to discuss one of my favorite topics, and I'm sure lots of people's here is as well. It's all about food. Maggie, good to see you. Holly, I'm sure you're going to be with us any second. There you both are. That's the biggest challenge for me, Dan, is the intro and the fact that you're both here. But thanks so much for your time. How are you guys doing?
I'm very well. I've never been introduced as a vegetarian athlete. Always like Rugby World Cup legend. So this is a nice title to add to my my list of accolades. I
missed that out, to be fair, Maggie. Like Hall of Famer. No, just vegetarian athlete now. That's what we're interested in today. If people want to find out more, Holly as well, again, like I've massively undersold you both, but we've got an hour here where people are going to find out a lot more about you both. So for everyone watching, please note that we have taken consideration of all your pre-registered questions, of which there were quite a lot, and we're going to be incorporating these throughout our discussion. And we also have Juliet behind the scenes who'll be forwarding on any live questions that you have, so we'll save some time for that at the end. So navigate yourselves to the right-hand side of your screens, where you should find a little questions box, and then below that you'll also find a handout section where you can access the maintaining the last couple of events that we've got going on for this month. So make sure you download that and get involved in those. But that is enough from me. I've got two special guests here, so I really should tap into their knowledge and expertise. And Holly, we're actually going to start with you on this one, if that's okay, because I think it's important that we set the context. But Maggie, please do jump in as well. We're talking about a plant-based diet, and naturally, I'm not sure what people's expectation is with joining this. That might, for some people, mean it's either just purely a vegan or a vegetarian diet. But I don't think that's strictly true. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, you are. I think plant-based diet is obviously it's become pretty popular in the last few years, and what it is essentially is a diet that focuses on foods primarily from plants, and it is also, those foods are significantly minimally processed. So I'm not sure if anyone was sort of aware of that kind of definition, but within that, and I think everyone listening will have their own interpretation of what a plant-based diet is. And there are essentially two established definitions, if you like, in the sort of nutrition literature. And the first is the one that you highlighted initially there, Jamie, which was an exclusively plant-based diet, which would be, in other words, a vegan diet, where you're focusing on minimally processed fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs and spices, and excluding to a wider extent all animal products, so your red meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy products. And then on the flip side of that, you've got the second definition, which I think is probably the most widely accepted definition of a plant-based diet, which is a predominantly plant-based diet. And a good example of that is something called a flexitarian diet, if you're aware of that term. And here essentially you've got, again, plant-based eating pattern, focuses on minimally processed plant foods, but it doesn't necessarily, excuse my siren, it doesn't necessarily mean a vegetarian or a vegan diet, or that you never eat meat or dairy or eggs, etc. So essentially you're proportionately choosing more of your foods from those plant sources.
Perfect definition, Holly. And Maggie, I think we should give full disclosure that when you were playing rugby full time, you weren't solely vegetarian or vegan, but just for context, would you be able to provide us with what your diet looked like when you were playing full time? Because Holly mentioned there about flexitarian, and we were talking before we started about how, as a rugby player, going solely vegetarian might have been a challenge for you. So when you were playing, what was your daily diet looking like, and how much of that was plant-based, would you say?
So yeah, to start off with, when I was playing, I basically was a meat eater, you know, and I ate a lot of meat. And when you talk about a plant-based diet, I guess at that time I just didn't think it was possible. I couldn't see how it would be possible, because we basically lived off it was protein to the max, if I'm honest, and it was very much just red meat. That's what we were encouraged to eat, and especially when you're in an elite environment where food is being fed to you, so you sort of eat whatever's been given to you. And there's a sort of like seed in the back of your mind to say, if I go down a different route of a diet, is that going to affect my performance? Is that going to mean that I'm not going to get selected to wear that England jersey? And will I miss out on going to a World Cup or a World Championship? And I know at that time it seems quite small, but when you're an athlete, you think that there's fine margins, and that one diet be the difference between me being the best that I can be and me being, you know, selected or not being selected over others. So when I was playing, I didn't, you know, I very much didn't even think about going down a vegetarian or vegan route. There was one player in my team who was a vegan, and I was always inspired by her. I used to ask her many questions, just about, you know, how does she maintain her performance, as well as making sure she has an overall healthy diet. Because I think that's the big question, is how do you maintain a healthy diet? So I guess when I retired in 2015, I then went down the route of being a vegetarian. I guess I didn't call it vegetarian at the time. I just basically stopped eating red meat, and then I slowly, it was almost I slowly went cold turkey, if excuse the pun there. But I basically stopped having red meat. Then I stopped having, you know, white meat, and then fish, etc. So I went down that route, and then I became very much, you know, I was a vegetarian, not plant-based, but I was fully vegetarian at that point. So it took some time to get to that bit. And I think that was the biggest bit for most people who try to go for that transition. You sort of have to say, look, just slowly take yourself down that route. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you come to the point where you go, I don't know why I'm eating that. I don't need to eat that anymore. I'm quite happy with going down this route of being, for me, a vegetarian. And so in terms of my diet back then, yeah, it was fully meat, literally 24/7 meat. And then now I don't even think about it. You know, it's not part of my daily living.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, that phased approach. And we've done a few of these sessions now. Hopefully people watching might have attended some of our other ones. And we've done events with nutritionists from Southampton Football Club. We've done events with the nutritionists from the England men's cricket team, from Norwich City Football Club. And within those three squads, none of the nutritionists that we've worked with have got either any vegetarian or any vegan athletes. And I think, Maggie, to your point about there's such fine margins that you don't want to do anything that could detriment your performance. And that kind of leads on to the next question, which I think is about looking more holistic at your diet and whether or not it's working for you. So if I start with you, Maggie, on this one, were there certain signs and symptoms or things that you were aware of when you were playing that you maybe thought, my nutrition's letting me down here? So it might have been taking long to recover, energy levels, and Holly, obviously, please do jump in from a clinical aspect after as well.
So Jamie, just to answer, I just want to answer sort of part of the last question as well. I wish when I was competing, I wish the nutritionist did talk to me about, various options in terms of, do you want to be a vegetarian? Do you want to go down the area of pescatarian or being a vegan? I think what's slightly disappointing when you're in a sporting environment, that they say this is the one route that you take. And if you're lacking in certain areas, here's some supplements. And that's what our lifestyle was like. And I actually look back and I think actually it's quite disappointing, and it sort of lets the athlete down because they don't really have a choice. And you feel like if you do choose a different route, you're letting yourself and the team down. And I felt for my friend who was a vegan, she almost sort of felt like she was letting people down sometimes when she was eating her food or her supplements, because she was taking a different route to everyone else. So just to answer that last part of your question.
I think actually that's a good point there, Maggie, as well, just to build on that as well, because we're not coming in here today with any angle. And when we had those chats with those nutritionists, I said to them, is it something that you would discourage? Is that the reason why? And they said, to be honest with you, it's not. It's just that there's that stigma maybe around that if you do follow a vegan or vegetarian diet, you won't perform at the level. So I think it takes a lot of courage to be the person to do that. And I think what we're here to discuss today is how you can do it if you do want to do it, and making sure you're doing it for the right reasons, but also making sure that you know exactly what you need to do. So when you're going to do it, you'll do it in the right way.
Yeah, and I guess sort of follow on to your next question. When I was an athlete, I like to think that all my levels are pretty good. I was fairly healthy, didn't have really too many issues. And I guess when I came out of sport, and then I didn't have a nutritionist to support me either. So I was very much on my own research, my own knowledge, trying to develop my skills in terms of knowing what to eat, where to eat, and especially when you're traveling around, that was quite hard being a vegetarian. And I think the only thing that I struggled with was that I lacked iron, and I think that was such a big issue for me. So I became anemic quite a few times actually, and went down the route of seeing a GP, and they gave me, they advised certain supplements for me to take. And I also like to give blood as well. And I found a couple of times out there, like, you're too anemic to give blood. And so I had to wait a long period before I could give blood again. So those are the times when I felt like actually being a vegetarian in particular, I had to really be on it with regards to my iron intake. Not having effectively mainly red meat was probably becoming a bit of an issue for me, especially with regards to just being tired a lot. I found myself being really physically fatigued, and I struggled when I was in the work environment. I wasn't concentrating enough. Well, I blamed it on the iron when I wasn't concentrating enough, but it was just my iron levels. But yeah, like that's where I think I had the biggest issue in moving to being a vegetarian. I was actually fine with all the other stuff around protein. I found other ways of making sure I kept that up, but iron was the hardest thing, because I understand you can get it in leafy, green vegetables and leafy vegetables, etc. But I think that's where I probably struggled the most. And even now, I still make sure I take supplements to ensure that I'm keeping all of that up. And I feel like I've got a very good balance now.
Perfect. Holly's, I think Maggie's touched on a big one there with iron, and we're going to have a whole section later on about supplementation. But in terms of, how you feel, like what sort of things should we be aware of? Because I think, Maggie, you're a great example of living through all of these things. But it'd be great if we could help people today that they don't have to experience it. They can just know what they need to do from the start.
Yeah, I think Maggie touched on some of the key signs and symptoms really to look out for, to know whether or not your diet is working for you, with fatigue being a huge one. And it's not just, related to iron, although iron is such an important one in the athletic community, both the professional and recreational athletic community. And the reasons for that I'll just briefly touch on, because it's really fascinating. When you're exercising at that level, you're using up a huge amount of energy. Not only do you need the iron to transport all of the oxygen around the body as hemoglobin, but there is inflammation that's produced after a vigorous exercise that actually raises another hormone in the body called hepcidin, which inhibits iron absorption. So actually it's harder to get the iron that you need. Generally speaking, you have higher levels of cortisol when you're exercising. Again, that's physiological. It's really powerful and important, and that also can inhibit iron absorption. So especially female athletes are at high risk of low iron, and male athletes as well. But it's a really important one. In terms of those symptoms, that fatigue that is it's unrelieved by rest, you know. And I think that's quite significant for people, because if you're able to go to bed, get your 7 to 8 hours or more, and you're still waking up feeling tired, unable to concentrate at work, I think that's a big red flag, and that does need to be investigated. It may not necessarily be your iron levels, it could be something else, but that's a key one. And I think Maggie may be able to elaborate a little bit on this better than I can, but your exercise recovery and performance, you know, those are going to be key parameters. And then things like, you know, your sex drive, your general interest in life. And then there are just general things like, you know, your appetite and all those sorts of little things can be affected as well. So there's all sorts of kind of clinical things that we might think about when someone is presenting with certain types of symptoms. And then added to that, if you've got the kind of clinical details with the blood tests, you can then look at the vitamin status, so B12, vitamin D, iron, and of course there are actually 3 levels of iron deficiency. So you're not necessarily looking at an iron deficiency anemia, which is where there's insufficient hemoglobin in the blood, and hemoglobin is that protein that's dependent on iron that binds to oxygen and helps transport it around the body. There's actually 2 stages before that we can pick up. If you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing, someone can look at your blood results, they can look at the full iron profile, look at your storage iron potential, and tell you if you're on that road to depleting your iron stores, which are going to show symptoms before full-blown iron deficiency anemia. So it is important, especially if you're an athlete. You know, I'm surprised that you didn't have the support, the nutritional support, Maggie. I think, you know, if you are you know, at that level, you should have that support. You should have those tests and check-ins, and because it's, you know, you're kind of playing a little bit with fire when you're expecting that high level of performance from your body without that kind of nutritional input. I think I'm a bit biased.
There's a huge amount there, Holly. Thank you. And so on that point, would you suggest that people that are transitioning to a more plant-based diet or vegan or vegetarian, would you suggest that everyone has a blood profile done, you know, after that transition, or is it just those people that are exercising more intensely than maybe the average person would be?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'd err on the side of everyone, really. If you're really serious about specifically veganism, which is where there's no animal products, and it's that sort of whole food diet approach where, you know, we were chatting before we came on here about somebody who's a vegan and not having any tofu or any of those concentrated forms of proteins that are also, you know, rich in iron, etc. I'd do a sort of an initial blood test, and then monitor if you're very active, at least every 6 months. And if you're not particularly active, then at least an annual check-in to look at those bloods and see if there's been any significant shifts there. Yeah, that would be mine.
That's something that I try and do now. So first, I would love a Holly in my life on a 24 basis. So feel free, you know, feel free to say live over here, it's fine. But honestly, even now, because I would like to transition, or eventually one day, to being a vegan. You know, I sort of want to go through that process, and I'm a CrossFitter really now, and you know, I still train really hard, and I still have to really keep an eye on what's coming in and how I maintain that. And monitor the symptoms, I guess, after, you know, am I recovering well? Am I fatigued? It's really important to, and I think regardless of what level we're competing at or training at, we should always be almost making sure that we're getting those check-ins where possible, just to see where we're currently at with our overall status, I guess. And I think especially when you're a vegetarian or vegan, it's even more necessary.
Yeah, I think these and it's important for us to, again, to reiterate that these are just challenges. We're not saying they're negatives at all. They're just things that we need to be aware of. And I can see we're getting lots of really interesting questions, and we will come to those. But on the opposite side of that, I just want to touch on kind of maybe the potential benefits of going down a more plant-based, vegan or vegetarian diet. And Maggie, I know that you're very conscious of the environment and the moral and ethical reasons. So I wondered if you wanted to touch on the reason why you decided to transition to vegetarian diet, and it might have not just be health related, it might be more broadly than that.
Yeah, so I guess when I retired from being an athlete and then I went down, wanted to be a vegan, vegetarian, it had nothing really to do with my health. I'll be honest, it was very much ethical. And I've always been someone who's, animal welfare has been really important to me. And I guess in my head, and I know lots of people talk about they've seen different documentaries, videos, etc. I made it kind of my focus not to see stuff like that, because I find that, I know what's wrong and what's right in my head, and I didn't want to go down the route of seeing stuff like that to really almost disturb me. But I knew that I wanted to make the path to changing my lifestyle, and being a vegetarian was definitely going to be the first step into that process. So I guess I felt if I can take myself away from eating meat products, then that's the first step. And I guess my natural next step would be to go down the vegan route. And again, I guess what I'm trying to do now is do it slowly. So I don't, so for example, I have, almond milk, soy milk, and different, depending on what product, depending on what I'm having. So if I'm having coffee, I probably wouldn't have soy, but I'd have almond. So, it's all those little bits. So I'm just slowly trying to do it. And again, for anyone who's listening and watching, I know we all want to maybe, let's say, make those changes, and I understand it might not happen straight away, but there's a gradual progress, and I'm trying to work my way now to become a vegan, again based on ethical reasons more so than health. But I have to still, I think they're sort of joint though. So even though I've got my ethical reasons, I still have to be aware of my health and how's that making me feel, as well, So even now I'm very much looking to make that change to being a vegan, but I've got to be really conscious about how am I going to do that? What impact is it going to have on me? Especially being a woman, we talk a lot about iron, especially when you go through your period. There's a lot of changes there. So I'm always thinking about both of them, but that was my main reason to sort of become a vegetarian. I keep saying vegan. I'm obviously definitely going to happen. It's going to happen. It's telling me in my head I need to be a vegan. So that's what made me move to being a vegetarian. So it's definitely been the big driver to want to make me move down the route of being a vegan as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned there that it wasn't health reasons necessarily and kind of ethically and morally, but I think that the impact on your mental health is probably quite profound as well, because you feel more comfortable in what you're eating. You feel like you're doing it for the right reasons. Holly, if I could just add on to that in terms of a question that we've had. Someone's mentioned, so we're kind of discussing at this point, Maggie's kind of touched on the environmental, ethical, moral reasons, which I think everyone probably has an element that they can relate to. But if we're looking at the physical kind of reasons that someone might go down that route, there was a comment earlier about how we haven't mentioned ethnicity in this conversation, and they've put this is the main reason why they would think to go plant-based. So that isn't something that I'm aware of. Is this anything that you've come across before?
When you say, can you clarify what you mean by ethnicity as being a reason to go plant-based?
So I think what they're trying to say is that certain ethnicities might benefit from going plant-based more than others.
Yeah, there is truth to that. We different ethnicities have different phenotypes and genetic profiles. I'm not a nutritional geneticist or a genetic nutritionist, so I'm not the expert in that area. It's a very specialized field. Actually, there's a geneticist called Dr. Giles Yeo. I'm sure you're aware of him. He's a BBC specialist, but he's very, very niche in this area. But it is true to a certain extent. Our nutritional requirements between men and women and between certain ethnicities are very different. We know that different ethnicities, sub-Saharan African ethnicities, tend to respond differently to certain supplements. Generally speaking, will require high levels of vitamin D no matter where they are in the world, even if they're in warmer climates. So there's all sorts of reasons why we might want to think about our genetics, and it gets complicated because most of us aren't we're not from one lineage. There's a lot of we're all very unique these days. So I'm sorry I haven't answered that probably to the level that might be helpful for that person. But again,
I think it's a great answer. I think it's an important point as well that we're not giving advice specifically for any individual. I think what we were discussing earlier about having your blood profiles taken is that everyone is different. So everyone's going to have slightly different measures, slightly different metrics, and you're going to have to adjust your nutrition based off of that. And I think this is more of a kind of logistical question. A few people have asked if you can do the blood profiling through a finger prick test. I assume you need a little bit more than that, Holly, do you?
Yeah, so we do, so something I do is actually an ultimate performance test for people that are very active. And at that level, when you're taking that amount of blood, say, for example, you're taking 57 markers, which is what we do when we're looking at someone's full health profile. We don't have to do that much, but that's what we tend to do. Yes, you can't do it via finger prick, but you can do a select finger prick blood testing. So there are companies where you can get your vitamin D tested, for example. That's going to be one marker. You can do a thyroid panel, for example. So 3, 4, possibly 5 markers. You can usually do those over a finger prick, but any more than that, you're going to need to get you're going to need to go into a clinic and get it done properly.
Perfect. Promise it isn't as bad as it sounds. I'm sure most people will be okay. I want to move on now a little bit, Maggie. I think this comes back into your area. You're one of the best athletes I've seen. You put me to shame every time I see you.
No, stop.
And I didn't big you enough at the intro, so I've got to work hard now. I want to talk about kind of maintaining and building your physique and your physical performance, mainly following a plant-based diet. And I think this will bring in the next part as well about protein and how you can ensure you're doing that. But do you have a structure to how you plan your meals across the course of the day? So it might be based on the exercise that you're doing and how that changes it. And also, are there certain things that you need to look out for in every single meal? Because I imagine as a vegetarian or as a vegan, it'd be very easy just to eat a lot of fruit and vegetables and you're just essentially living off a carbohydrate-based diet.
Do you know what's funny? When I first became a vegetarian, my mindset was very much no meat, but make sure you eat your dairies and get lots of like beans, etc. in it. So basically, I basically spent most of my time just eating bread and cheese, and that was my diet. And if anything, I think I put on weight. So I didn't really do anything for my health, and that says a lot. I think that's for a lot of us who sort of make that transition. We have very, very little understanding behind what you can eat. We have a general guidance, but we have very little understanding. So we go down the route of eating almost high fatty food, which doesn't really make you healthy naturally. So, but also you're not getting your complete nutrients. So, and I guess also to answer your last question as well, for people who want to learn a bit more about what to eat, I always say go and do your own research. I think it's really important. We should all be accountable for what we eat, and the best way to do that is just go and do research. I read a lot of journal articles, but I also just magazines and listen to other nutritionists talk about vegetarian, vegan based diets, as well as I listen to other athletes as well. So CrossFit is my thing, so I listen to other athletes who are vegetarians and get an understanding behind what to eat and how to fuel my training. So I guess what I do, I'm really conscious about what I eat in the morning. So for me, basically, I do the porridge. So I try and use almond milk instead of actual milk, and that makes a big difference for me. I try and make sure I put lots of seeds in. So I'm going to talk you through my general day. Is that okay? It's a bit of a random thing to think about.
This is your time.
I'll tell you, it's all about me. So, so generally, I'm very much porridge based because I know that I can get some of the essentials in really there. So I tend to put seeds, lots of fruit, almond, milk, and I sometimes I utilize I forgot the name of it, but it's a vegan protein powder, and where if I need be, if I feel like I'm sort of lacking, I put stuff in my porridge, especially if I've trained in the morning. So I do CrossFit, and a lot of the training is fitness orientated, but a lot of it can be quite high weight based stuff. So you are breaking down your muscle fibers. So if I've had a big session in the morning, I put a bit of protein powder into my porridge. I snack in between, obviously, before I go to lunch. My snacks, though, are fruit-based, really, and I tend to, I'm just trying to think, I don't really do anything different to what I would have done if I was eating meat. I tend to try and eat fruit, rice cakes, that's my thing for snacks. And then my lunch, for my lunch, I try and, where possible, I try and find some corn, not necessarily tofu, but corn. Again, I still have my dairy products. I do find cheese-orientated stuff. I'm more of a soup person rather than going carb heavy. I very much used to be, but I've tried to change that around. And I think through having a vegetarian diet, I have found myself lean out a lot more because I feel like and I used to have issues with digesting food. So that, I I feel like now moving away from the meat-based product, that's helped a lot. So yeah, I tend to not go too carb heavy at lunchtime, but try and get a bit of everything again. You know, my vegetables, my soup. I tend to go soup. That's me. I'm sounding very boring right now, but that's how I live my life.
Good.
And then again, snack base. And then the snack base, and then my dinners, where I tend to make sure I again cover everything. So it would be a corn or tofu based meal, depending on what the day's been like in terms of how much training or how fatigued. I'm always assessing myself, so I'm always doing almost a daily MOT check, and I'm like, when I get to dinner time, like, am I really tired? How's the day been? Do I need to top up a bit more in terms of protein, again, iron, so I'm always assessing myself, because some people might be different, but I don't necessarily plan out my week. I plan out how the day's going, and then I can change. I don't tend to stick to one thing, because again, I treat myself like a car. If I feel like things aren't working, then I need to make some adjustments. I do take supplements though, because I to try and stay on top of things, and that's usually in the morning in terms of mainly iron, because I've had so many issues of being anemic. That's something I try and stay on top of. So hopefully I've answered your. I've made sure in my head to say, don't say takeout, takeaway, don't say not had takeaway.
To get an insight. Daily thinking.
I try and make sure I get a good balance.
That's exactly. You made a couple of really interesting points, and I take my nutrition on a day-by-day basis as well, Maggie. Like every day is a completely fresh start, and I try and adjust what I have based on what's going on in that day. A couple of things that I want to pick up. We're going to come back to supplements, so hold tight for that one. Cheese and bread sounds great. And then we just had a comment in. So the person that asked the question about ethnicity, they actually meant ethical, but autocorrect did them a good one. And I think it stitched us all a bit, but they said it was still a very good point, and it was appreciated. So I think it's actually, we didn't plan to go there, but I think it's actually an interesting point as well.
Well, we should go there. Yeah, it's important probably to touch on that.
Yeah, so still valid. And then Holly, wanted to check over to you, because we've had a lot of questions around sort of those meat alternatives, those substitutes. Fast food restaurants are now offering vegan and vegetarian meals and things like that. Maggie obviously mentioned like corn, tofu, soy, all those sorts of things. What's your thoughts from a nutritional perspective on the meat alternatives? And are there some incidences where they can actually be filled with sugar, salt, and what sort of things should we be looking out for there?
Well, certainly I do think that a lot of these meat alternatives are very functional and very important, especially when you're looking to, if you're very active and you're looking to meet a certain protein quotient every day. The tofu, the corn, they're going to be way more concentrated, so it's just going to be easier. It's going to make life more easy for you to meet your protein requirements, your energy requirements as well, which is something it's important to touch on a whole food plant-based diet, where you may not meet your energy requirement because you're having a lot of fiber and it's very filling, and these foods are low energy density, so that can also often be a problem. Personal opinion on them, I think they are, as I said, they're very helpful. I think tofu is a fantastic food. I think it's so nutrient dense. It's a brilliant source of protein. You're going to get 20 to 30 grams of protein per 150 grams of tofu. It's really excellent, especially if you're, athletic. Corn, it's funny because it's not really something I ever bring into sort of recommendations for people, corn, but it does serve a very valuable purpose. It is a mycoprotein, so it's a fungal protein, but it's nearly as good as tofu, in my opinion, in terms of its total nutrient profile. You do have to be careful with, basing, if you're buying things that are, depending on where you're buying from, total salt intake, total, you've got to look at your diet as a whole, and look at that kind of thing. But again, if you're removing some of the other sort of animal-based processed meats, which I think most of us should be avoiding some of those processed meats anyway. It's horses for courses, isn't it? There's no perfect diet, and I think that we've got to get out of this mind frame of a perfect clean diet. I think that can be quite problematic. But yeah, you can certainly, if you're including some of these more processed sources of vegetarian proteins, then you're much more likely to meet your protein requirement, your daily protein requirement, if you're active.
I don't know if you two
Jamie,
potentially.
sorry,
Oh, go on.
can I ask Holly a question? And I'd really love to know, because there's so many meat alternative options out there, and that's the hardest bit. Where do you go? You know, and every superstore has their own sort of versions. I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a Waitrose person. I'll go to the Waitrose. They have a very good meat alternative aisle, and there's so many things to choose from. But then obviously Linda McCartney has a really good range of stuff, but I find a lot of her stuff is good but very fatty. So I guess, where do you go? That's the hardest thing. Like, I'm looking for meat alternative, but also I want something that's not going to be full of fat, like you said, not full of salt as well, because I know that is an issue. So I guess where would you advise?
I think you can find, I mean, certainly if you're shopping at Waitrose, you're going to be able to find a really good range of products. And most, supermarkets these days are investing millions of pounds into building this, section of their produce and their supply. So I wouldn't worry about not having access to these foods. And certainly, in any major supermarket, I'm not naming all the other ones, but you're going to be able to find them. And I think that I don't want to scare people with those, the salt and the fat and all this sort of stuff, because we're designed to enjoy the process of eating. We need fat to make things taste good, for our hormones, for satiety, for blood sugar balance. Or you need it. You've got to get it from somewhere. And if you are having that predominantly whole food, plant-based diet, your diet is going to be quite low in fat. So you are, is it bad that manufacturers are putting it back into products? No. But if your diet is high in saturated fat anyway, because you're less health conscious, then you might want to be more careful about it. But again, it's totally individual. And from what you're saying, you're doing is, it all sounds pretty good. And you've got to, in terms of protein intake, my recommendation is always to split it up throughout the day. Don't just leave it all to the evening, so having some of that corn in at lunchtime as well is important for proper protein synthesis. But no, you're doing a really good job, and I'd say given that you're not having any support, you should give yourself a bit more credit, because you're doing it.
Thank you. Then doing the hardest thing. Sorry, Jamie, because I know you can ask another question.
No, you do it.
Make it affordable. Because I'm not going to lie to you, since becoming a vegetarian, I do spend more to make sure I stay healthy. Where the bad thing was, when I ate meat, I bought cheap meat. I wasn't buying ethical. Unfortunately, I didn't think very much ethically about what I was buying and how and where I was getting it from. So now I think completely different, but I'm spending more. And it's great to say that I go to Waitrose, but I do think, what about the general population? For someone who just might be, I do CrossFit, yes, but other people who exercise, how do you make it affordable? Because you don't want to be spending loads of money. Otherwise, what happens is you sort of go down a different route. So you want to make sure that you're not spending lots, but also still making sure that you live the lifestyle that you want to, and you're eating well and getting a balanced diet.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess that you've got the upper end. You've got some of those specialized, concentrated, processed forms of protein, which, as we've discussed, they're very valuable. They have a very important role to play. Some of those can be more expensive. Others aren't. I mean, there's some of the brands of tofu are actually pretty reasonable, and they're cheaper than a cut of meat. So I think it swings and roundabouts. Tins of beans, whether or not you're choosing butter beans, black beans, all these, they're really cheap. I mean, that you're going to get, you've got to get a can of beans for 50p or 60p. They're pretty cheap to buy. And yeah, you need to be eating more of them. So to get your protein requirement in let's say a completely whole food plant-based sense, where you're not adding in something like tofu, you'd want to have have 150 grams of beans and then 100 grams of whole wheat pasta. That's quite a lot of food, and it's quite a lot of fiber, but that's a really cheap meal, right? Beans and pasta, that's a cheap meal. So I think there are ways to do it on a budget, 100%. It's just whether or not that's flavorful for you, whether or not that's giving you all of the quality of the food that you want, the textures that you want, and it's giving you the variety that you want as well. And I think that's a challenge, to be honest, with any diet. And I think food's a great thing to spend your money on, personally. So I think
it's worth investing in, isn't it? And I think this wasn't planned plug, Maggie, but Vitality members obviously can get 25% off Waitrose products, so maybe worth checking that out. Nicely done. I'm just trying to recap here some of the sources of proteins, just because it's such an important topic. We get so many questions, but if you two can add to this list, I've tried to think of as many as I can, but we're thinking about things like tofu, soy, nuts, seeds, lentils, beans, pulses, quinoa, and then if you're vegetarian, not vegan, you've also got things like yogurt, cheese, eggs, milk. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that list?
No, one thing I will say about the dairy products though, and this just comes back to something Maggie was saying earlier, is if you are living on cheese and bread in that kind of like transition phase, you've got to be careful about, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, you do have to be careful with iron, because when you're eating a really, really high calcium or you're relying on dairy. Dairy is a fantastic source of protein and it's a complete protein. It's really incredible. But if you're having a lot of those meals, then you know calcium inhibits iron absorption. So you've got to be careful of just having a lot of dairy in your meals for iron absorption. Other sources of protein, I think you picked up on the key ones. Don't forget as well, you can also buy there are different types of products that you can buy that are derived from the lentils, the legumes. So you can buy legume edamame, pea pastas, you know, that are really high in protein actually. So you can get, you know, between 70 and 100 grams of protein from a portion of that. Sorry, you can get 20 to 30 grams of protein in a 70 to 100 gram portion of that. Sorry, that's totally wrong.
I was going to say that is a good return.
Yeah, I was going to say. So and I think you picked up on all of them really, all of the plant-based ones. Yeah, Maggie?
Cool. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You're the expert, Holly. So I'm just like yeah,
I'm keeping my
add
head
more to it. I've missed out alone.
Cool. I think hopefully there's plenty of options there for people to try. And usually and naturally, we as a kind of, I think, advocates for health and well-being would always suggest a food first approach to supplementation. So people that follow just a varied, balanced diet of meat, dairy, fish, veg. Generally, if you're following those sorts of diets, it is possible to get all of the sufficient nutrition and micronutrients that you need. But when you're taking out elements for your diet, I think that's where possibly you do need a little help. So Maggie, you mentioned at the start about some of the supplements that you take. Would you share with us what you take and maybe what made you start taking them in the first place?
I couldn't say off the top of my head without them having them with me. But the main things that I've been taking have been iron, really. That's the thing that I still continue with. I take my daily vitamin supplements on a regular basis, just because that's whether I was vegetarian or not. Like something I'm very much conscious about. I feel like, and I know, Holly, you're going to slap my wrist. You're going to say you should be taking that through your food supplements. But I always feel like, I don't know, maybe it's because through being the athlete that I still am. And I always feel like I'm pushing my body to a limit where maybe what I'm eating is not necessarily ticking all the boxes. So I take my vitamin supplements in the morning still. And then, I take iron supplements. That's the additional thing that I add to it. But that's something that I do. And it's a really interesting, I mean, maybe probably going off a bit tangent here at the moment, but it does make you think, like, do I need to go back to eating a certain way to make sure that I don't add those supplements? But I guess it's a mindset thing, and I guess I've always felt like I'm not hitting the mark because of what I'm eating, and could I do more? And supplements is probably, and through being an athlete, you're sort of, maybe it's just me, but you're sort of encouraged to take supplements and protein shakes and etc. That's the lifestyle. You almost feel like you always got something to add to your current food, and that's been the mindset I've continued on, really. So that's how I've always done it. Sorry, I can't detail exactly what supplements I'm taking, but vitamins, and then obviously the iron supplement has been quite key to me.
Nice, that's perfect. I think you're right. Like, as an athlete perspective, you'll do anything that you can to get that improvement. Holly, is there any others that you would definitely recommend for anyone? I think maybe is this more relevant to vegan diets rather than?
Yeah, I think if you're taking that flexitarian approach where you're, maybe most of your diet is plant-based and then you're having some, introducing animal products, it's less relevant. But certainly not slapping a wrist at all. I think you're very responsible to take supplements. And I think for a lot of people that do include animal foods in their diet, even in that scenario, supplementation is helpful for a lot of people. A lot of people have, you know, genetic predispositions to, you know, enzyme issues. That means that they need more certain types of micronutrients. So I definitely don't think it's an issue supplementing, as long as it's the right thing, and obviously there's no risk of toxicity, which there are for certain nutrients. But some of the ones that are vitamins and minerals that are classically low, if you're taking this plant-based approach, and this is not just down to low levels of those micronutrients in the total diet, it's also as a result of potentially, you know, a lot of phytic acid in the diet. If you're having a lot of grains and beans that are actually reducing your ability to absorb minerals, a lot of fiber in the diet, you know, your transit's much faster, so things are going through the gut much faster, and again, you don't get so much of an uptake. There's all sorts of reasons why you may be lower in certain micronutrients, but iron, as we've touched on, which is such an important nutrient, not just for blood health, but for cognitive health, lipids, for fat metabolism, immune system, it's really important. B12 is classically low if there's no supplementation in vegan diets. And it is important to mention here that a lot of people come to me saying they're taking nutritional yeast, and that's fine. Like, nutritional yeast is a source of B12 if it's fortified by manufacturers with a synthetic form of B12. Natural nutritional yeast doesn't contain the form of B12 that we can absorb as humans and we can use as humans. So we have to think a little bit sort of strategically around things like that. Vitamin D is also very important for vegans, but actually for the whole population. A lot of people are low on vitamin D. And then zinc, choline, retinol, and omega-3 fatty acids, which are those long chain fatty acids that you find in oily fish. Those are going to be things, again, really important for performance, for brain health. They're incorporated into cell membranes, so they're very much involved in how we function. Those are the sorts of things that I'd be on the lookout for. And some of those, you know, may not be so familiar with or necessarily think about as a vegan, that you might want to think about.
Maggie, everyone needs a Holly. Iron, B12, vitamin D, zinc, choline, retinol, and omega-3. Cool. Thank you. That's a really, really strong list. I'm conscious of time, and we're getting all of the questions that you're asking, we're bringing into this conversation. So we are covering as many as possible, but do keep them coming in the last few minutes. Just want to touch on another point here, which I think is interesting. And someone said, for the not so active people, is there anything else that people can try to do to boost their energy levels and general health? But I want to tie this in with another question about specifically vegan and vegetarian diets. How do you construct your plate? So we all kind of know, like if I give you an example, when you're eating a balanced diet, you might go for a palm-sized portion of protein per meal, like 1 cupped handful of whole wheats and whole grains, 1 cupped handful of veg, and like a thumb-sized portion of fat. Like that's kind of like how you'd build up a plate. Do you have any advice for how you build a plate if you're following a vegetarian or vegan diet? And maybe, Holly, if I ask you that from a clinical angle, Maggie, we had another question, so I'm going to tie 2 here in, which was, what meal would you cook for a team of athletes who've just finished a game that are vegan or vegetarian? So yeah, Holly, I guess, what are you looking to include? And then Maggie, if you can bring that into a practical dish, that'd be perfect.
Okay, so on the plate, and again, depends on what kind of protein source you're choosing. So if you're choosing something that's quite processed, and I say processed not in a derogatory sense, as in this is a very useful tool if you're a vegan. So if you're choosing something like tofu or corn, you can actually build that plate quite similarly to if you were eating animal products. So, you know, you've got your a third of the plate protein, a third of the plate veg, and a third of the plate sort of whole grains or starchy vegetables or something like that. If you're not choosing some of those more concentrated forms of protein, at that point you'd be probably looking at 2/3 of the plate to have some form of a protein containing element. So again, that might be beans and a whole grain, beans or lentils and a quinoa, and then I'd always supplement that with nuts and seeds as well or something. You know, my partner, I don't know if you do this with your porridge in the morning, but adding, you know, a dollop of like nut butter on top or something. You're just always thinking about it's always adding and trying to add protein into the multiple elements of the plate, probably 2/3 as opposed to 1/3. So that's the kind of the way I would think about it.
I love that. I think it's great. And then what are you whipping up, Chef Maggie?
Well, my go-to, if I was on Come Dine With Me, this was what I'd serve anybody. So let's say a fantastic rugby team, male or female, I would probably go to a vegetarian lasagna, because I can just pack it with a load of stuff, really. So usually when I do make it, I utilise corn, but I mean, you don't have to have corn, you can change that. And what I love about corn mince, and this is one of the things that I guess I like to try and do, is regardless of people are meat eaters or not meat eaters, the corn mince almost is a good supplement because they just think it's the same. They don't judge it any differently, and it's very lean as well. So I would give a corn, so utilise corn. If not corn, I would fill it with vegetables, again, beans, lentils. You don't have to use a cheese sauce. You can obviously substitute that. And I would go down that route very much. A nice filling, hearty, corn protein-based main meal. Obviously fill it with more vegetables. And if I want to go down a bit of carbohydrates, for me, I do like potatoes. So I wouldn't use roast potatoes, slightly fatty. I would go down just the boiled potatoes on the side with a bit of bread. There we go. That is a delicious meal. I can see everyone's like, I'm coming over to your house.
Yeah, I'm so hungry right now. I don't know if it's a combination of lunch chat, but I am starving. The kind of one area that we haven't touched on, but again, I think as documentaries on Netflix and things like that are coming out, and there's more information readily available to people through social media and through everyone's got an opinion on lots of different things. A few parents have commented on about like whether or not vegan and vegetarian diets are suitable for kids. Holly, if I come to you first with a clinical angle, but Maggie, I know that you're a new mum, and kind of it would be great to get your thoughts on that from a practical element as well. So yeah, Holly, just in terms of physiologically, can that provide enough nutrition for a growing person, I guess?
Well, firstly, congratulations, Maggie. That's wonderful news. And secondly, I certainly don't want to, you know, it's very personal, and I really appreciate this is very emotional. This is your child, right? So someone saying you should do this or you shouldn't do this is it's very difficult, and I don't want to be in that position to say yes or no. But I think that it's really important in a child under 5 years, so from conception to the first 5 years of life, the brain is going under an incredible amount of development, and then again between the years of 10 and 19. So we are the only species that takes literally 20 years to fully mature and develop, and that goes for all of our cognitive processes. But there's those first 5 years of life where the brain is developing and growing at a phenomenal rate. The requirements for the body are, in terms of micronutrients, iron is so important, like for brain development for a baby. You cannot. You know, you can't play around with the stuff. You've got to know what you're doing. And if you are putting your child on a vegan diet, I really strongly advise you to get some support, and you're going to need to supplement that child with iron and other nutrients that their brain is going to need to develop properly. But between the ages of 5 and 10, it's less of a concern. But then again, between the ages of 10 and 19, the body's starting to develop secondary sexual characteristics, and there's huge growth spurts again that are happening. And at that point, again, both boys and girls are very susceptible to zinc deficiency, iron deficiency, etc. So we've got to be careful about supplementing. So I can't say yes or no. I think it's possible to do, but personally, I'm not sure I would impose that on a child. You're going to have to deal with your own child's independence and wanting to refuse what you give them anyway. So that you're going to have enough challenges on your plate, for sure.
Can I just quickly follow up and ask as well, Holly, if anyone watching this wants to go down the route of vegan, vegetarian, and maybe wants their kids to be involved as well, where would you advise they go for the right support? Because like you say, if you're going to do it, you've got to make sure you do it right. So is there anywhere that you direct people to go to get that appropriate support?
I would advise somebody to book in a session with either a registered dietitian, so somebody who's worked clinically in a hospital scenario, or a registered nutritionist. So you've got to make sure that person has got the right credentials. There are a lot of nutritionists out there now. Some of them are well qualified, some of them are not so well qualified, and also everyone who's a nutrition expert has their own opinion. And I think you've got to have somebody who's got a really clean, objective viewpoint and has studied, you know, to degree level beyond, so that they really understand the implications of this stuff. Otherwise, you know, the best place to start is the Dietetic Association website. So the British Dietetic Association website, the BDA. You're going to find there plenty of fact sheets and information about nutrition through all of the life stages, you know, pregnancy, child health and well-being, and they should have some information there for, I don't think the BDA supports veganism in children under 5, but you'll find the information there, I think.
Amazing, thanks, Holly. And then Maggie, I guess more on a personal perspective, what's your thoughts on that?
So this is an interesting topic, because me and my other half, we literally went back and forth behind, because we're both vegetarians, and we were like, what do we do when our child is born? Are we going down the vegetarian route, or what we do? Are we, you know, they're going to eat full meat, etc. We did a lot of research, to be honest, and we basically finalised on going down the pescatarian route. So our little boy basically just, you know, does everything apart from, basically just eats fish, really. That's the main thing. But we make sure that we you know, all of his meals cover all of the relevant nutrients. We also talk to a health advisor. So when you give birth, you know, generally you get assigned a health advisor, and we spoke to her in long depths behind our decision. And what's really good is there's so much resources out there for parents who choose to go down the vegetarian or pescatarian route and vegan route. I mean, again, I personally wouldn't go down that route of vegan, but when we made the pescatarian decision, we were like, okay, we need to just find some recipes, and we were given some really good resources that had a load of recipes, just really main sources of food to try and make sure your child is getting into you. And it was a big discussion. You know, it's something quite serious, because you live your life a certain way, and you sort of go, I want my child to live that same life, but they're in a different development to you. And also our child goes to nursery, so you have to have that conversation with them as well about, you know, we want our child to eat X, Y, and Z rather than that. So it was a really tough conversation, but I feel, you know, like I said, he's healthy, he has regular checkups, and he's doing really well. So that's really important. If you do choose to take your child down a certain route, then it's important that they have regular checkups, and you do look for the resources out there to ensure that your child is eating well. But the challenge that I also had was when I was pregnant as well. You know, when you're pregnant and you're thinking about, I need to make sure I get all the right nutrients in me so my child develops really well, that was very hard. And again, I had to speak a lot to my GP, but also health advisors around me, to ensure that I was eating the right things to ensure my child was developing healthily.
Yeah, and you know, I think what you've just said about actually what you've probably found a really nice balance in there, because if your baby's got more proportion, they're eating more fish proportionately, then their DHA levels are going to be pretty good, and that's also really important for brain development. So there's some lovely there are some lovely things there. And just to touch on, I know we've got to finish, but just to touch on the pregnancy thing that you just said, it's really hard for pregnant mums to get everything that they need. You know, the breast milk doesn't contain iron, like literally contains a tiny bit of iron. So actually your iron stores are going to support the baby for its first 6 months of life, you know. So that's really tough. Your iron stores have got to be on point to enable that baby. And it's really hard for mums who, you know, just they're not given the right support, and they're not given the right advice. So you know, it's a difficult time for everyone, and it's sounds like you've done a really great job, and you've made a really important decision that's good, that's, you know, works for your whole family and for your baby as well. So sorry.
Definitely, I totally agree. No, I think that's a great point, and I think I should ask you both back to do another session, because I think we could do a whole hour on parenting and nutrition for kids and things like that. I think it's such an important topic, so look out in the future for that. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but you've both shared so much good information, and Juliet's just put in the comments that everyone wants you both back including me for sure. And I think nutrition is an important one, not in terms of just nourishing ourselves, but also protecting the environment and the world around us. And hopefully our discussion today, I'm sure, has given you some inspirational insights, but also some practical guidance on what you can do to manage your well-being, and possibly introducing a little more focus towards the benefits of plant-based diets in the future. I think that Maggie and Holly, thanks so much for your insights and knowledge. I've been writing all kinds of scribbles. I won't show you what's in front of me now because it makes zero sense, but there's so many key takeaways. And we really appreciate you being generous to share not only your knowledge, but also your personal insights as well. It's super interesting.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Holly.
You guys are great. And for everyone watching, I hope you have enjoyed our event today. As you leave, you'll be greeted with a feedback form. So please do let us know your thoughts and comments. We're always looking to improve. Hopefully they're all good though. And in the meantime, if you want to download again that handout section for the remainder of our events in February, please do that. And we hope to see you really again soon. Take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch up again soon. Thanks both.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.